Iraq's new prime minister has launched a sweeping anti-corruption crackdown, with Iraqi media reporting that dozens of politicians and senior officials were detained in overnight raids. Now, authorities say the operations are aimed at fighting suspected corruption across state institutions.
This campaign is only the beginning. The issue of corruption is not over. We continue to fight it. Anyone who has public funds must return the funds to their owners. The people's money must return to the people.
Well, with me here is Min Al-Arabi, editor-in-chief at The National and real Iraq expert. I regularly ask you to join me on this show when there is news out of Iraq. And it is such an important country when we look not just at the country for its people, but the wider region. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. But let's just start with what we've seen over the last 48 hours. What's your take on these arrests, the seizure of millions of dollars in cash, in gold and properties? Who is this new prime minister and what's he up to?
So corruption is Iraq's biggest problem. We talk about militias. Militias wouldn't exist if they weren't able to siphon off money. Electricity, 23 years after the war to remove Saddam Hussein, still is a huge problem for people. It all goes down to corruption. And so for any prime minister coming in, they all give pledges of tackling corruption. And we've had the previous prime ministers, Mohammed Shia al-Sudani, Mustafa Kadhimi, and those before him, all make small moves to tackle corruption. Ali Zaidi, this new prime minister, has come in quite bold, and it's not him alone. Of course, he's working with the judiciary, and the forces we saw yesterday making the arrests were the counterterrorism forces that report directly to the prime minister. And the moves against these people, the vast majority of Iraqis feel that this is a real move against corruption, but it's only a part of a much bigger equation of the kleptocracy in the country.
And let's talk about the bigger picture, the kleptocracy in the country, the support that this prime minister is getting from this US administration, which many say have emboldened his actions at present, and the wider regional story here about Iran-backed militia in Iraq. Many people around this region tell me that Iraq has become a more important and significant place for Iran than Lebanon, which we hear a lot of talk about through the Iran-backed Hezbollah at this point. Your thoughts?
So Iraq, because of 800 kilometers of border it shares with Iran, allows Iran and Iranian, not only officials, soldiers, militia people to cross back and forth. When there were protests against the Iranian regime at the beginning of this year, there were armed men taken from Iraq into Iran to help squash the protests. So it's hugely important geographically, hugely important because from Iraq, and this is the battle against corruption, partly is to stop money being siphoned off to Iran. Iran's been able to get away from the sanctions imposed by the US and the UN because of money coming in from Iraq. In Lebanon, Iran spends money on Hezbollah fighters. So it's a different dynamic. And of course, with Syria now out of the equation, it is much harder for Iran to get to Hezbollah and Lebanon. So the geography, again, plays such an important role because before, Iran got its wish come true when it would go through Iraq, through Syria, into Lebanon on the border with Israel. That's now gone. But Iraq becomes that much more important as its kind of last line of defense to push through this narrative of the axis of resistance, being with a foothold in Iraq.
The Shia crescent, as we were wont to call it back in the day, as it were.
I always had problems with that.
Yeah, that's my reason for saying, as we were wont to say, and probably, should have been pulled up on it at the time. Al-Zaidi, the new prime minister, set to visit DC next month. What is his relationship with the Trump administration, and how conditional do you believe is the support that he appears to have, not least through Tom Barak, who is the US special envoy to not just Iraq, but Syria and Turkey? How conditional is that support on the PM's ability to rein in these Iran-backed militia?
The Americans have made it very clear, publicly but also privately, in the meetings that Barak's had with not only Prime Minister Zaidi, but also increasingly we see a political role for the head of the Iraqi judiciary, Faiq Zaidan. Now, technically speaking, the judiciary should not get involved in the politics, but in Iraq, nothing actually works as it technically should. And so the message has been clear from the American administration. First of all, President Trump going out publicly and saying that Nouri al-Maliki cannot come back as prime minister is the reason that Ali Zaidi today finds himself as prime minister. We nearly had a different prime minister altogether going back in time with Nouri al-Maliki. So the very direct interjection of the US allowed Zaidi to become prime minister. And on top of that, he's had meetings where he has been told very clearly, push back against the militias. The US launched something called Operation Economic Fury. And Economic Fury is targeting not only the Iranian regime, but also sanctioning militia groups in Iraq and demanding that there is accountability of where the money is being siphoned off. And Tom Barak made very clear to Zaidi that the US can be a great ally, but will not turn a blind eye to the support of militia groups, but also corruption. So they have to prove seriousness. This government, which is only formed, by the way, halfway. We still don't have a new Minister of Defense, no Minister of Interior. So there's a lot of internal dynamics that's broken. But Prime Minister Zaidi clearly wants to give a signal to Washington that I'm serious, I will take bold action. Let's see how long it goes. In Iraq, we've had arrests happen before and very quickly cases dropped. But if he stays forth with not only the arrests, but also a wider circle of corruption networks, he'll get a lot of support from the US because they've made that now a priority.
The US and Iran talks absolutely central to what is going on in this region and where we are headed next. You've made the point that Iraq is so central to Iran's influence, perhaps more so than in Lebanon at present. I just want to close out with the following, because if a picture is worth 1,000 words, what do you make of the following? The Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi in Baghdad meeting Iraqi leaders. Meantime, the Iraqi Foreign Minister in Damascus in Syria as we speak. What do these images tell you about Iraq's role in the region right now and going forward?
So you're right to call up those two big movements. The Iranian foreign minister is in Iraq, and the Iraqis are saying we'd like to restart some sort of meeting between Gulf partners and Iran. At the moment, Iraq has to prove that it would actually be neutral territory, because in the eyes of many Arabs, Iraq is too close to Tehran and too influenced by it, but we'll wait and see. The Iraqi foreign minister going to Syria first visit since the removal of Bashar al-Assad, hugely consequential. And of course, Tom Barak, being ambassador to Syria, really pushing on the importance of an Iraq-Syria nexus that can help not only economically, oil flows, but also a new kind of Arab center that in the Levant that is pushing back against Iran. A containment of Iran requires success in Iraq. And so that's why these moments and these meetings, exactly as you said, these pictures tell 1,000 words of could Iraq be stabilized and stand up to be an important Arab player in the region.